Going back some years ago, in considering our options for the property, and there were some comments about the agricultural zoning and just keeping it agricultural, and I think it remains a very simplistic approach when you look at the fact that the property has been tax residential. Much of it is tax residential and has been for the past 20 years. And as we examined our options for the property going back several years ago and looking at the agricultural zoning and looking at the highest and best use under an agricultural zone, we're looking at industrial agricultural options for that land. And I've always sought to create a plan for the community that accommodated a number of benefits. And one was making much of the land available for recreation, setting aside land for wildlife, dedicating land for community-based farming. There was the acknowledged environmental and wildlife values, and that there would be opportunities for enhancement of that. There was acknowledgement of the financial value of the land being privately owned. And there was a recognition of the desire to secure public ownership of the majority of that land for agricultural, environmental, and wildlife values. There was also a commitment by Century not to pursue its industrial agricultural options until the 1st of July of this year, which we have, of course, lived up to and which we continue to put into abeyance, pending the immediate outcome of this process and this proposal before you. And one of the big issues that came forward during the summit was, in contrast to the planning that we had done previously on our property, which showed most of the housing right up basically on the south against the forest. There was a comment made at the summit that the wildlife value, which is most intense in the forest, would have the benefit of keeping farmland contiguous with it, and that in fact there would be a contiguous farm to forest to Boundary Bay Regional Park corridor. One of the questions that has come to me, and perhaps it has come to you separately, is in terms of dedicating that amount of land to Delta. The question that is posed to me at the shopping center and walking down the street is what is Delta going to do with that land? What is the plan that Delta has for receiving 430 acres of agricultural land? And I certainly have very strong feelings about how Delta should address that opportunity. And I have my concerns that Delta needs to develop a strong vision of how a community-based farm in Tsawwassen, it would be Delta's farm, can benefit each of the local community, the wider farming community, all of Delta, and of course be a regional model for food security. Living up to my obligations, I trust that Council will live up to your obligations and continue on the productive path that you began with the Summit, Mayor Jackson, and which we have embarked on over the summer. But it also has to involve Council becoming an active participant in a process that will give this proposal a fair public hearing as a function of the election and who people want to choose to be their leaders for the next 3 years.
Following Monday's council meeting where the landowner has presented his latest development proposal, I must say I left it being fairly disappointed and quite outraged at the behavior of Mayor and Council. They seem to suggest that we need to continue to have public input and public hearings on this latest development proposal, which completely ignores all of the public opinion that's been gathered over the last few years. This is also the same mayor who shut down the agricultural land reserve hearing where they were looking whether or not there was support for putting the Southlands back into the ALR, and the mayor decided to stop that hearing even though over 70% of the correspondence that they received was in favor of it as well. So there seems to be a continuing trend of mayor and council seeming to ignore the data that they collect themselves, showing that the public really wants to keep this land agricultural. The current proposal that's being put forward has got the exact same pitfalls that all of the previous iterations have had as well. It's still losing a good chunk of valuable farmland, some of the best farmland in the world, in times of extreme food security issues being prevalent in everybody's mind. In addition, there's issues around loss of wildlife, bird habitats, and it's also a big issue in terms of increasing the population of Tsawwassen, increasing traffic, and all of those issues of more people that an infrastructure really can't handle in the town of Tsawwassen. So at some point, I think the developer has to realize that the community is not going to support his vision for the Southlands, regardless of how many times he threatens industrial agriculture. And I also think the mayor and council are sooner or later going to have to realize that they have a duty and an obligation to listen to the public and to listen to the public opinion that they've collected and be respectful of the majority opinion. And if they don't do so, and with the upcoming November election, there will be a change in leadership to people that will more accurately represent the public that they have been elected by.
I think the concern for me in the Southlands issue is the process that has transpired over this issue since the whole process started in 2007. Basically, there was 25 people who spent almost 2 years extensively studying the Southlands issue and communicating with the community, taking the community's input, expanding on that input time and time again through open houses, etc. Eventually developing a very detailed design brief, which culminated in 3 designs for the Southlands that would have given maximum amount of resource back to the community from the land while keeping farming as the central focus. That work has never been allowed to hit the table. It's been blocked at every stage of the way. If we go right back to the Tsawwassen area plan, the Southlands was not allowed to be discussed. Yet the Southlands is the most significant piece of land in the Tsawwassen area then and now. When we go through the processes that have taken place, the ALR application and all of that, we come back down to the Mayor's Summit, and the Mayor's Summit once again, the Southlands planning team was blocked from giving any input, any other valuable research into that plan. Well, other parties were welcomed